Hey everyone, Dave here for another Blu-ray DVD collection update / haul video. This is the second video for the month of May 2022, where we'll be taking a look at two of the most recent waves from Umbrella Entertainment. Lots to look at here, so let's get into it. Alright, so once again, I'm doing a whole bunch of videos this month because I've fallen a little bit behind. I'm trying to get everything out. We're going to be taking a look at the last two waves from Umbrella. I believe these are the March and April waves from 2022. I'm still waiting on the May wave to come through, and we'll cover them on a video next month. So let's dive right into this because there is a whole lot of titles here to look at. Alright, let's kick things off by taking a look at a couple of the most recently released titles from the Ozploitation Classics collection. First up is Snapshot. A young, impressionable trainee hairdresser, Angela, played by Sigrid Thornton, becomes a media sensation after posing topless for an advertising campaign. Thrust into the high-stakes world of glamour and fame, Angela discovers that she is being stalked by a mysterious psychopath in a Mr. Whippy van. Alright, so I absolutely loved this one. I thought this was just such a fun Ozploitation flick. Sigrid Thornton is so fun here. I believe this was her first role, or at least her first major film role, even though this is a small, independent Ozploitation film. I thought this was great. This has everything that you'd come to expect from an Ozploitation film. The sex, the violence, the kind of psychedelia, but it almost feels like it's one of the more kind of accessible ones. It never goes over the top. It never really feels too gratuitous in its nature. And I feel like if you are new to Ozploitation, or if you are, slowly picking up a few of these trying to get into it, I think so far this is probably the best way to go into this. It has everything, but it's more subdued, and it almost feels like somewhat of a statement, particularly with all these movements and stuff that are going on at the moment. I feel like it's a very relevant film and something that still really holds up. The transfer on this is gorgeous. I don't believe it's a new transfer. Another distributor, I think they're called Glass Doll or something like that. They only released a few titles and then went out of business, and it looks like Umbrella has picked up a lot of their titles. So this one has been released under that label a number of years ago, and it looks like Umbrella has finally got this one onto the market. Really love this one. This is probably one of my favorite of these Ozploitation films, and I can highly recommend it. We've also got Harlequin. In this supernatural political thriller, a hypnotic faith healer, Wolf, saves the life of the son of a wealthy government senator, being groomed for power before both the senator and his wife fall prey to the enigmatic Harlequin's spellbinding powers of manipulation. A modern-day reworking of the story of Mad Monk Grigory Rasputin, the faith healer and mystic who held a darkly charismatic influence over the Russian Tsar. Alright, so I didn't love this one as much. I feel like it almost doesn't really push too hard into Ozploitation territory, just like Snapshot. This one is more of a kind of political thriller crossed with supernatural horror sort of thing. There's all these little elements kind of going on here at once. And again, it's also based on the story of Rasputin as well. It has so much going on that it kind of does get a little bit muddled as to what it's really trying to do. I also don't think it's a particularly great movie. And again, it doesn't really feel like an Ozploitation film. It does have a great lead performance by Robert Powell in here. But other than that, it wasn't a film that, charmed the pants off for me like some of these movies have. This one has a decent transfer. It's certainly not the best that Umbrella have offered us recently. It's certainly not the worst though. I think that this probably just has, inherent damage, and kind of the original print elements probably aren't in the greatest of shape. So it doesn't really look the greatest, but some of these movies you have to expect that with it. This hasn't been released on Blu-ray before. I'm not too sure how old this transfer is or whatever. Umbrella doesn't really note that on the release here. Look, again, if you've been collecting the Ozploitation line, it's a no-brainer to pick this one up, but if you're looking for a little bit more, something a bit more Ozploitation-y, maybe go in a different direction. We've also got Long Weekend. Attempting to resurrect their failing marriage, Peter and Marcia set out on a camping trip to a deserted stretch of the Australian coastline in the hope that a long weekend in the sunshine will help them patch up their differences. They trample through the countryside, destroying everything in their tracks. Their callous disregard for the environment soon becomes apparent when the animals start to seek revenge. I thought this was so cool. Now, this is the second release that Umbrella have put out of Long Weekend. The first release was under their original exploitation line that didn't have the slipcovers or any of that kind of stuff, because this is the newly revamped kind of line that they're doing at the moment. I believe the transfer is exactly the same, so if you do own that original one, you probably don't need to get this one unless you're, you know, a completist and you're collecting all these kind of new wave ones. But that one has been out of print for quite some time and been very, very expensive to get. I did manage to get my hands on it. I paid like full price for it, I think $30, $35 or something, because I wanted to complete that collection, but lo and behold, they've reissued it about a year after. You know, such is life. But this is great. This is so much fun. And look, people who want to get their hands on it, have been wanting to get their hands on it, can finally get their hands on it. I think that's awesome. Had so much fun with this. This is like a stereotypical Ozploitation. It's got beautiful Australian scenery, great Australian performances. It has got a great environmental message. It's gore, it's blood, it's action, it's exploitative stuff, you know, sex and all that kind of stuff is well over the top. It is so great. I had fun with this, and I feel like it's kind of an accessible one because some of these, they go way over the top with the gore. While there's a lot of gore and violence and stuff in this, it's never like too over the top. It is a little bit tongue-in-cheek, and it is like a power ride from beginning to end. This movie does not relent. So much fun. I loved it, and it certainly deserves its title as like one of the greatest Ozploitation films ever made. Definitely get your hands on this one, particularly if you've been waiting for Umbrella to get it back into print, because it is a blast. Next up is the latest edition from Sunburnt Screens, Gregor Jordan's Two Hands, starring Heath Ledger, Brian Brown, and Rose Byrne. When young, struggling go-getter Jimmy is offered the shot of a lifetime working for local crime boss Pando, he grabs it with both hands. But not everything goes to plan, and when his special delivery goes missing, a package of $10,000, he finds himself in a whole lot of trouble with the boss and in desperate need of help. Alright, talking about great Aussie films, Two Hands is hands down my favourite Australian movie of all time. The Castle notwithstanding. I love this movie so much. I can watch this over and over and over again, and although I own this one on Blu-ray like 2 other times, this is the 3rd time it's been issued on Blu-ray in Australia, I had to watch it again because I love this. This is Heath Ledger's breakout role. It's Rose Byrne's breakout role. It's Gregor Jordan, who is one of my favourite Australian filmmakers. It's his breakthrough role. And they all kind of came up together with this one beautifully gritty sort of neo-noir crime caper set in the seedy underbelly of Sydney's King's Cross. This is one of the greatest crime films I think ever made, and I just love it. I love everything about it, the performances, the stylistic design behind it all, and of course it's got a really fantastic soundtrack with a number of songs by Powderfinger on there, who were up and coming at the time as well. This was kind of their breakthrough, you know, kind of entry into the mainstream Australian zeitgeist, which is crazy. This movie is just such a convergence of all these incredible talents, filmmakers, performers, musicians coming up together, all under the thumb of Gregor Jordan. And if you haven't seen this movie, I highly, highly, highly recommend getting your hands on this one because I could not praise it enough. We've also got another installment in the Sunburnt Screens line, The Light Horseman. In the great Australian spirit of courage and high adventure comes a true blue legend. 4 gallant men of the Australian Light Horse Regiment are thrust into the last great cavalry charge when the British campaign in Palestine becomes a stalemate in 1917. In a desperate attempt to aid the Allies' cause, 800 young Australian horsemen set off against gunfire and insurmountable odds in a last-ditch attempt to save the attacking British soldiers from imminent annihilation by the Turco-German army. Light Horseman is easily one of the greatest Australian war films ever made. This is up there with Gallipoli and Breaker Morant. For me, it sort of, you know, came out around the same time in the late 1980s. It stars a all-star cast including John Blake, Peter Phelps, Gary Sweet, and Sigrid Thornton, who are all terrific in this. This is a large-scale Australian war film. When you think about Gallipoli, this is about that same kind of scale as that. It is absolutely astounding. This is the kind of movie that would not get made today in this kind of form because it's all practical. you know, 800 men on horseback. It's about a cavalry regiment, and there are some terrific like battle scenes with these horses. You couldn't do this now because of, you know, animal rights laws and all that kind of stuff. Of course, totally understandable, but it is always interesting to go back to these movies and kind of see how they were done back then. And again, as I said, some like Australian cinema great sequences in this movie. If you love war film, just in general, war movies, check this one out. If you love your Australian stuff, check this one out. This is an absolute classic. It's previously been released on Blu-ray by Umbrella like 10 years ago, long out of print, so I'm happy that this is finally back on the market and in this gorgeous little edition right here. We've also got a couple of Beyond Genres titles right here, including Heavy Metal. Based on the fantastical illustrated magazine Heavy Metal, producer Ivan Reitman enlists the world's greatest comic book artists to create the otherworldly tale of a glowing green orb from outer space that spreads destruction throughout the galaxy. Only when encountered by its one true enemy, to whom it is inexplicably drawn, will goodness prevail throughout the universe. Lavishly drawn, the vignettes of the orb's dark victories include the character voices of John Candy and Harold Ramis, plus a pounding soundtrack by Black Sabbath, Blue Oyster Cult, Cheap Trick, and many other heavy metal classics. Alright, so Heavy Metal is, I think, the first animated film. I believe the first animated film to be inducted into the Beyond Genres line. One of few, I think, animated films that Umbrella has really ever released, particularly on Blu-ray. This is an adult animated film, so certainly don't pop your kids down to watch this. It's rated MA15+ for a reason. I believe this is probably an R-rated in America. It's got everything that the Beyond Genres line sort of encompasses. Stuff like violence and sex and adult themes and kind of over-the-top kind of, you know, genre stuff. But this is a really beautifully animated movie. Again, there are all these little vignettes, almost these little short films that are kind of tied together through this kind of narrative thread. Each piece is drawn by different artists. All the art styles are so wonderful, trippy, surreal, very, very different from each other. But it is such a, a really gorgeous animated film. And it is a really beloved cult film, of course, with Ivan Reitman pulling the strings behind this one. This is my first time checking this one out, and I'm so, so happy that I did get the chance. I believe this is taken from a brand new 4K master that's recently been produced for this film, and it looks stunning. It looks absolutely gorgeous. One of the, you know, best animated transfers I think I've ever seen on Blu-ray, because it doesn't do that thing that Disney does with all its old movies and scrub away all the grain. This is like purely cinematic, filmic looking animated masterpiece. I think it's great. This is definitely worth getting your hands on if you're a genre film fan or if you're an animation fan. This is a really great curio of animation, and if you haven't seen this, you're in for an absolute ride. I'll tell you that much. Next up in Beyond Genres is Child's Play. That's right, the original Chucky movie. Introducing one of the most original and terrifying horror creations in history, the pint-sized killer doll, Chucky. After 6-year-old Andy Barclay's babysitter is violently pushed out of a window to her death, nobody believes him when he says that his birthday present, an innocent good guy doll named Chucky, committed the fateful act. I've never watched any of the Chucky movies. Child's Play, in fact, I bought the first 2 or 3 of these not that long ago, actually. Maybe about a year ago, I finally bought them because they were cheap at JB Hi-Fi, and now they've released the first one under the Beyond Genres line. Now, of course, Child's Play is a Universal property. The more recent movies have been with Universal, but this one was created at MGM, so the rights for this one have been up in the air for many years. Umbrella actually issued this movie on Blu-ray a long time ago. The first issue of this Blu-ray was actually an Umbrella issue. So now Umbrella are reissuing it again in this gorgeous special edition collection with all these great bonus features and stuff. I don't know, I can't figure out whether this is a brand new transfer or not. It kind of seems very similar to the old one, but it looks fine. I mean, this kind of movie, you know, it would have been made at a cheaper budget with kind of cheaper film stocks and stuff. So it doesn't look really great, but it is a nice filmic transfer. Look, I enjoyed this movie. I thought it was a bit of fun. You know, I'm not usually a huge, you know, horror slasher kind of fan, but when they're not incredibly gruesome or gory, I can get behind them. And this Chucky one, it's almost a bit farcical as well. There's a bit of comedy in here and a bit of like, you know, it's a little bit silly. I enjoyed it. I thought it was a bit of fun, and I'd highly recommend this gorgeous edition. The cover is beautiful. If you do already own this movie, you're a big fan of it, I think I'd grab my hands on this too, because it is a really cool little edition. Next up, we've got the H.P. Lovecraft Collection, which includes 5 classic stories inspired by the works of H.P. Lovecraft: Reanimator, Bride of Reanimator, Beyond Reanimator, Dagon, and Color Out of Space. Now, of course, H.P. Lovecraft was the master of kind of horror, sci-fi fusion, genre kind of stories, and these books were adapted into, I guess, genre films. In fact, the first 4 movies in this, the 3 Reanimator ones and Dagon, were all issued under the Beyond Genres label. These were like the first 4 that we issued under Beyond Genres. They have been out of print for a long time under that label, so now people can finally get their hands on these. They're not, you know, labeled as Beyond Genres. It would have been cool if they had maybe put this in a Beyond Genres slipcase or special edition collection or something. Would have been good, but alas, that's not what they've done. But at least if you've been kind of trying to get your hands on these, the discs are the same, I believe. You can finally get your hands on them. And of course, you've got the added bonus of Color Out of Space, which is this really quirky kind of, I think it was only from a couple of years ago, starring Nicolas Cage. Really cool little movie. I haven't checked all of these out just yet. I just simply didn't have the time yet. But no, for genre film fans, these are like absolute classics, real great cult classics. This box set was actually recently released by Random Space Media. They partnered up with Umbrella to release this collection. It was obviously successful enough for Umbrella to reissue the collection as their own release. It's got a different cover here too. I really like the cover that's been used on this. I think it's actually better than the cover that was used on that Random Space release, which I think you can still get. I'm not too sure. So you can kind of decide which one you want to pick up for yourself. But there you go, that one is out there for all you genre fans. You can check that one out. We've got our very first double feature from the World Cinema range, including Claude Berry's 2-part Water of the Hills epic, including Jean de Florette and Manon de Source. In Jean de Florette, a greedy landowner and his backward nephew conspire to block the only water source for an adjoining property in order to bankrupt the owner and force him to sell. In Manon of the Spring, a beautiful but shy shepherdess plots vengeance on the men whose greedy conspiracy to acquire her father's land caused his death years earlier. Okay, so these are 2 movies I've wanted to see for a long time. I do own the original release of Jean de Florette from Umbrella. They put this out on Blu-ray many years ago, but I wanted to watch both of these movies together, kind of back to back, because they are really part 1 and part 2 of the same story. Wouldn't have made sense if I'd kind of watched one and then years down the line watch the other one. So I've been waiting and waiting for them to put the second one out, and now finally they've done this double feature. Now what this is 2 parts of an epic novel written by Marcel Pagnol. They had previously tried to make the book into a movie by splitting it up into 2 parts a few years earlier, and for one reason or another the second part never happened. So when they got around to readapting it, they brokered a deal with the studio to allow them to make both parts simultaneously. So both of these movies were shot at the exact same time, back to back, and released in cinemas, within months of each other. So this is essentially one movie split into 2 parts, but each part kind of takes place, 10-year with a 10-year kind of gap in between them. These films are both gorgeous. I love my French cinema, particularly when it comes to the classic French cinema of, the 60s, 70s, 80s. There's so much great stuff in here. These feature really, really terrific performances from Yves Montand and Gérard Depardieu. And so just great. Emmanuel Abat, terrific French actors in here. Apologies for absolutely butchering some of those names right there. Jean de Florette, I found, was the better of the 2 films. I was just so totally encapsulated and engrossed in it. I adored it. Manon of the Spring was not as good, I didn't feel. I had like that same kind of tension and whatever in it, and the story wasn't as interesting. But I love them both as a kind of a big epic. I think, in fact, I watched them 2 mornings apart. I think they would actually work if you had like 4 hours to sit down and do like a big epic film. They would work very, very well like that. If you love these kinds of French classics, highly, highly recommend this one. If you love your world cinema classics, highly recommend this. Hell, I highly recommend this one to everyone because I had such a blast with both of these films. Next up, we have another installment in the world cinema line, Amur, directed by Michael Haneke. Retired music teachers Georges and Anne have spent their lives devoted to their careers and to each other. Their relationship faces its greatest challenge when Anne suffers a debilitating stroke. Though George himself suffers from the aches and infirmities of old age, he bravely ignores his own discomfort to take care of his wife, and is determined to keep his promise to her that she never go back to hospital. Again, we've got another French language film. This is actually Austrian, German, French movie. It is absolutely gorgeous. This won the Best Foreign Film Academy Award back in 2012, 2013, and it is one of the most stunning pieces of foreign cinema I've ever seen. Two incredibly powerhouse performances here. Both Jean-Louis Trintignant and Emmanuel Rivard deliver these stunning performances, and it's a really harrowing, hard watch, but it's just such a beautiful, exploration of the frailties of human life and growing old, and, what happens to us in that kind of phase of our life, and facing our fears and facing, the end of our lives, I suppose. This is a beautiful movie, and just one I've wanted to see for a very long time, and thankfully finally out on Blu-ray thanks to Umbrella in this gorgeous collection right here. Again, if you're a fan of foreign cinema, I would highly recommend this one because it's beautiful. And we have a brand new sensual cinema release. This is another double feature. This set here includes two classics of Japanese erotic cinema from writer and director Nagisa Oshima. In the Run with the Senses, banned around the world, Oshima's extraordinary tale of sexual obsession remains equally shocking over 30 years since its notorious release. This explicit study of love and death was so controversial in Japan that cans of the film were smuggled to France to be processed. In Empire of Passion, a married woman and her lover murder her husband and dump his body into a well. After a while, his ghost comes to haunt them while the local gossip grows stronger. Alright, so again, we've got a couple of movies here which are going to be a little bit hard to talk about on this platform. Again, they are two classics of erotic cinema. The Sensual Cinema line has issued a few of these in the past. They sound exactly what they sound like. Explicit sex scenes and stuff like that. But this is a really great hallmark of Japanese cinema. There's a lot of really great films like this that came out of Japan over this period of time. And I think even still now, they release a lot of movies like this, where it takes that kind of eroticism and explicit imagery and attaches them to actually like a real beautiful, dramatic story. These are certainly movies that I think are going to be an acquired taste, and you kind of have to get outside of your realm of regular viewing to check these out. But I think they're actually quite fantastic, really beautifully made movies. Empire of Passion in particular, it's not as explicit as in The Realm of the Senses, and it has like this really great kind of horror backbone to it as well. It almost feels like it's got kind of shades of Akira Kurosawa works in there as well, that kind of heightened fantasy horror, but then you've got this kind of layer of passion and eroticism on top of it as well. I think these are both really quite beautiful movies. They are again going to be an acquired taste, but if you're into this kind of thing, I would definitely check it out. Even if you're just a fan of world cinema, I think these are interesting to check out too, to kind of expand your horizons on the kind of content that is actually out there. Next from Sensual Cinema is Blue is the Warmest Color. Adele's life is changed when she meets Emma, a young woman with blue hair, who will allow her to discover desire and to assert herself as a woman and an adult. In front of others, Adele grows, seeks herself, loses herself, and ultimately finds herself through love and loss. Of course, Blue is the Warmest Color has been released on Blu-ray in Australia previously. This is a film from 2013, and it is gorgeous. This is probably one of my favorite French movies, particularly contemporary ones anyway. And this is just such a stunning movie. This is one of Léa Seydoux' first kind of, I guess, breakout roles. She is absolutely terrific in this, and it has been a while since I watched it in full. I took a look at this. The transfer is pretty much exactly the same as the previous one that has been issued on Blu-ray, but I absolutely adore this. It's not only contemporary in the fact that it's been made recently, but the themes that it tackles and the way that it tackles them and presents them on the screen with this same-sex relationship, I think is just so beautiful and such a touching, really gorgeous movie. And I really wish we had more stuff like this from Western cinema. There's so many great movies like this from, you know, foreign cinema, but you know, Western film studios are still struggling to push movies like this, and it is such a shame. But hey, we do have this one, and I wouldn't imagine it in any other form than in the beautiful French language with these incredible performers right here. Do yourselves a favor and check this one out. I couldn't recommend it highly enough. Next, we've got All-Star Comedy Capers Double Feature Volume 3. This is another one featuring two films starring Gene Wilder. In See No Evil, Hear No Evil, Wally Carew, Richard Pryor, is a blind man looking for a job. Dave Lyons, Gene Wilder, is a deaf man who runs a newsstand. When Dave hires Wally, he never imagines they'll have to work together to survive. In Another You, after years in a mental institution, George, Gene Wilder, is finally released and tries to adapt to life outside the hospital's walls. Things quickly become eventful for George, however, when he is mistaken for Abe Fielding, also Wilder, a wealthy rich man who recently vanished. Alright, you guys know I absolutely love Gene Wilder. He is one of my favourite comedic actors. Richard Pryor is one of the absolute greats as well. And when these two came together on the screen, they were absolutely electric. Their friendship kind of off-screen, their relationship off-screen was a little bit more fiery, but in a lot of cases like this, these are the kinds of people that work so well together on the screen, especially when you have like the straight man and the funny man. Now, See No Evil, Hear No Evil is probably my favorite of the bunch of the films that these two made together. They made 4 films together. This one has actually previously been released on Blu-ray only like 3 or 4 years ago under Viavision. It's now been reissued by Umbrella, so I guess the rights lapped there pretty quickly. And Another You, this is the first time this has arrived on Blu-ray in Australia at least. Again, love See No Evil, Hear No Evil. Another You, I can't really say the same. This is the last movie the two did together. It is enjoyable enough, but it's not one that I really loved. I didn't get heaps of belly laughs out of it, as I did See No Evil, Hear No Evil. Of course, there's another double feature on the market at the moment, which has another 2 Gene Wilder films in it. Stir Crazy, which also has Richard Pryor, and Hanky Panky, which stars him alongside Gilda Radner, who was his wife in real life. Those 2 are really fantastic movies as well too, so if you want to seek out that collection too, you can get that one from Umbrella. Next up is Retro Horror Collection number 1. This one features 3 classic Universal horror movies, all sequels to their original Frankenstein film. In The Bride of Frankenstein, Mary Shelley reveals the main characters of her novel survived. Dr. Frankenstein, goaded by an even madder scientist, builds his monster a mate. In Son of Frankenstein, returning to the ancestral castle long after the death of the monster, the son of Dr. Frankenstein meets a mad shepherd who is hiding the comatose creature. In House of Frankenstein, a deranged scientist escapes from prison and recruits Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, and the Wolfman to get revenge on his behalf. You guys also know that I love my classic Universal horror movies, and these 3 are no exception. Bride of Frankenstein is certainly up there as probably the greatest one of all of them. It's one of my favorites. My favorite of all time is Dracula, but Bride of Frankenstein is very, very, very close there. I'm actually really surprised that Umbrella has been able to secure this one, because this is one of, you know, the major titles from the classic Monsters line. So to see that in this alongside 2 of the lesser beloved ones is kind of a surprise to me. Of course, Son of Frankenstein, House of Frankenstein aren't anywhere near as good, but they're fun kind of schlocky late 1930s, early 1940s horror monster flicks from Universal, which are always fun as well. Just don't hold them to that same kind of standard as the Bride of Frankensteins or the original Frankenstein or Dracula or the Wolfman, any of that. The later ones are kind of more schlocky and cheaper in style. Now, this set, of course, doesn't have the original Frankenstein movie. I would have been very, very surprised if Universal had licensed that one out. It also doesn't have, there's a number of Frankenstein sequels in there. There was The Ghost of Frankenstein as well, and The Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman. Both of those came between Son of Frankenstein and House of Frankenstein. Don't know why they're missing. You've also got House of Dracula and Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. They all starred Bride Frankenstein 2. I don't know whether Umbrella are going to be doing any more of these classic Universal monsters. I imagine that Universal don't mind kind of licensing out the smaller films, the cheaper ones. Again, very surprised Bride of Frankenstein is in here, but I'd be very interested to see whether they, issue sets of like the sequels to The Creature from the Black Lagoon or The Mummy or The Wolfman or any of those. I'll keep an eye on those, but definitely if you don't have any of these, I personally own the Frankenstein collection, the Blu-ray collection that they did, Legacy Collection or whatever it's called, the American edition. I imported all of those because these are some of my favorite movies, but it's really cool to get these in a Umbrella collection as well. And if you don't own them, if you haven't imported, this is a decent way to get some of these into your collection. We've got another retro horror double feature, Volume 4. In Island of Lost Souls, a mad doctor conducts ghastly genetic experiments on a remote island in the South Seas, much to the fear and disgust of the shipwrecked sailor who finds himself trapped there. And in The Black Cat, horror icons Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi star in the shocking classic The Black Cat, based on the works of Edgar Allan Poe. Alright, this is a really great collection of classic horror movies, one from Paramount and one from Universal. The Island of Lost Souls is an adaptation of the classic novel The Island of Dr. Moreau, where Dr. Moreau creates all these weird kind of human-animal hybrid creatures. It's really creepy. It's from the early 1930s, a pre-code horror film, so you just know that they kind of went all out with this, and it is really quite frightening even today when you watch it. It would have been absolutely terrifying back in the day. The Black Cat is terrific. It's one of my favorite classic under-the-radar Universal, I guess, horror monster films. It's got both Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff in there, both Frankenstein and Dracula, and of course based on the works of Edgar Allan Poe. It's just absolutely terrific. This came out recently. This was released as part of like a Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi horror set from Eureka Entertainment in the UK, which I did import. A great little box set with a number of other movies in there as well. But it's great to have this on the Australian market, something I never thought would come out in Australia on Blu-ray. But if you love your classic horror, this set right here is a must-have. Both of these movies are astounding. We've got a Worlds Gone Wild double feature. 1984 is a dark tale of human resilience. George Orwell's dystopian vision of a totalitarian future is a landmark of science fiction storytelling. The Handmaid's Tale. In a futuristic, theocratic and dystopian United States, Kate is forced to become a handmaid, a sexual slave that serves as a surrogate for couples who desire children but who are unable to have them themselves. Of course, Handmaid's Tale may be familiar to you through the television series that ran for multiple seasons. I don't know if it's still going, starring Elizabeth Moss. I haven't watched the series, but apparently it is amazing. I've got to get to that. And of course, George Orwell's 1984 is cited constantly as a text that, scarily enough, predicted a lot of things that were to happen in the future. This is the first thing that really put its put a lens on the idea of, governments kind of controlling humans and all this stuff. And of course, it's been brought up ad nauseum during this whole pandemic thing from kind of, I guess, either sides have kind of brought this up as like, hey, look what this predicted, whatever. But look, these are both fairly decent sort of, worlds gone wild movies, which focus on these kind of human struggles between authority and humans. Both are really, really great movies. I'm particularly more interested in checking out the Handmaid's Tale series after seeing the movie, but 1984 is kind of forever a classic. These two might seem slightly a little bit dated right now, but these pull up both really beautifully on Blu-ray, and they're both definitely worth a watch. We've also got Icons of the Silver Screen, Volume 3, which puts a lens on two of the greatest music biopics ever put to screen. The Glenn Miller story tells of young musician Glenn Miller, who grew up as a dedicated trombone player and went on to make it big in show business, starting up his own band, destined to become one of the most successful and influential groups of the big band era. The Benny Goodman story tells the story of Benny Goodman, who is taught clarinet by a Chicago music professor and is advised to play whichever kind of music he likes best. But to make a living, Benny begins by joining the Ben Pollock Traveling Band. Alright, so as I said, these are two of the greatest music biopics ever put to screen. I adore these movies. I think this is the first time I've ever watched them in full. They're movies that are just always on television, and you always just have to stop yourself and watch them whenever they're on, no matter how far into the movie they are. I adore these. These are some of my father's favorite movies, some of my grandfather's favorite movies. It just shows how generational these are. They still stand the test of time. They still feel very modern and very relatable. And the two lead performances in these, James Stewart as Glenn Miller and Steve Allen as Benny Goodman, just terrific. I have been waiting for these movies to come to Blu-ray for a long time, and finally they are here. Finally got a chance to sit through and watch them from beginning to end. I feel like I'd watched the whole movies just in kind of bits and pieces over the years. Kind of got to see them beginning to end, and I love them. They're so good. They're movies that I will go back to, you know, over and over again in the future. If you love your Hollywood classics, icons of the silver screen, I highly recommend this collection right here. And we've got All Action Double Feature Volume 1, featuring White Line Fever and Airwolf. White Line Fever. In 1970s Arizona, a young married man becomes an independent long-haul driver, and he risks his life fighting the corruption in the local long-haul trucking industry. And in Airwolf the movie, a scientist who has created a super helicopter has defected to Libya and taken the machine with him. A secretive government agency hires an ex-Vietnam war pilot to go to Libya, steal the chopper, and bring it back. Both of these movies are kind of over-the-top action movies that you would expect from the 1970s, 1980s, the kind of movies you would see bundled up together in double features at like grungy grindhouse theaters. Of course, White Line Fever is this as over the top as you can get with one of these kind of action movies. Really great action sequences and stuff like that. Not the best movie ever made, but if you want to get in there for just crazy action, people driving cars and people beating each other up and stuff like that, over the top, you'll have fun with this one. Airwolf the movie is actually the pilot episode of the old classic Airwolf TV series. It was edited later years. It was like an uncut, sort of uncensored stitching together of the pilot episode that was, I'm not sure if it was released theatrically, but I know it's been released on like DVD and Blu-ray and stuff in the past. It's essentially just the pilot tally movie of Airwolf, but in like in a film format. So both of these are a lot of fun. I had fun with both of them, and I know if you love this kind of stuff, you will too. We've got a fantastic Marx Brothers collection, which includes 5 of the most classic Marx Brothers films ever put to screen: The Cocoa Nuts, Animal Crackers, Monkey Business, Horse Feathers, and Duck Soup. The Marx Brothers, Groucho, Harpo, Chico, and Zeppo are the reigning kings of comedy chaos and remain one of the most iconic comedy teams of all time. From their early days in vaudeville and Broadway through their wildly popular motion pictures, the Marx Brothers kept audiences of all ages laughing out loud with some of the most hilarious routines ever imagined. This collection comes housed in an Amur case inside a slipcover and features the 5 movies across 3 discs. Alright, so what else is there to say about the Marx Brothers? These are some of the greatest comedians who ever worked in Hollywood. These are some of the earliest films from the early 1930s. Now, again, I said these are 5 movies over 3 discs. The shortest of these movies is about 65 minutes long. The longest of these movies is about 95 minutes long. So they are very easy to watch. These are filled with really great classic vaudevillian comedy sketches and great body comedy, great kind of little visual gags and one-liners and stuff like that. The Marx Brothers just absolutely excelled, and this really is a collection of pretty much their greatest works. This is a box set that has actually been issued. This is the 3rd time, I believe, at least the 3rd time it's been issued. It was released in the US maybe 5 or 6 years ago. I actually have that collection, really beautiful little digipack edition, and then it was released, I think, by Arrow or one of the other boutique labels in the UK, had a really great big box set of it as well. This is definitely the smallest and least lavish box set of the lot, but if you are an Australian local, this is certainly going to cost you a lot less than it would be to import either of those sets. The discs are basically the exact same ports, features all the exact same stuff, and the great thing is that these movies are just wonderful no matter what packaging you get them in. I'd highly recommend this one too, particularly in my case, I'm trying to save on space at the moment, so it's really nice when when you get something in a nice little Collection 7 oversized box set. But this is a really beautiful set. I love the artwork and stuff on it as well. I couldn't highly recommend these enough because the Marx Brothers are just favorites of mine. You know how much I love comedy, and if you love comedy as well, it's always worth going back to some of this early stuff and seeing where some of the more contemporary comedy kind of has its roots back, you know, nearly 100 years ago. We've got the Australian debut of Casualties of War Extended Edition. Private Max Erickson, Michael J. Fox, is stationed in Vietnam under Sergeant Tony Meserve, Sean Penn. Though Meserve saves Erickson's life during battle, the two men clash when the callous senior officer orders the abduction of a young Vietnamese woman to be used as a sex slave. When Erickson refuses to take part in the abuse, tensions between him, Meserve and the rest of the unit heat up and finally explode during a firefight with Viet Cong troops. Alright, Casualties of War is a movie I've wanted to see for a long time. I've heard great things about this as, you know, a great drama and a great, you know, two great powerhouse performances, Michael J. Fox, Sean Penn, and they certainly do deliver in this movie, both absolutely tremendous. This is very, very different to anything else Michael J. Fox, I think, ever did, but he is so good in this role, and it certainly is, you know, the kind of character with a heart of gold, you know, that he made his trademark, but kind of under a different kind of guise. This is a very deeply harrowing film. It's very dramatic. It's a very hard watch. These are all things that I've understood about it over the years as well, but finally got a chance to check it out, and you know, it certainly is a hard one to watch. It's, you know, an anti-war film. There were so many of these anti-war films throughout the 70s and the 80s, and I feel like this might actually be kind of the best of the bunch in terms of how full-on and harrowing it is, maybe with notwithstanding stuff like, you know, Platoon. This kind of felt, you know, as deeply kind of disturbing and harrowing as Platoon, I think. But look, I really love this. I think this is a really fantastic movie. Very hard watch, but I would recommend this edition right here. Next up is Cannonball Run. Hundreds of car enthusiasts, starred by Hong Kong and Hollywood movie stars, start on a 3,000-mile dash across the United States. Everyone has their own crazy ideas of how to beat the field. The chase is full of hilarious and exciting incidences. Alright, Umbrella has finally got Cannonball Run on Blu-ray after releasing Cannonball Run 2 a number of years ago, at least like 3 or 4 years ago, they put that one out. I finally bought that on Blu-ray recently. I don't know if I had a feeling, but I was kind of like, I put it off for so long thinking, I don't want to own that unless I can own the first one. But some of the Umbrella titles do go out of print pretty quickly, and when I saw it on special, I thought, I'm gonna grab that just in case they put out the first one at some point, and they finally have. This movie is so much fun. This is like your typical Burt Reynolds, farcical kind of car movie. This follows on the back of like Smokey and the Bandit. It's directed by the same director, Hal Needham, who did the Smokey and the Bandit movies as well. You've got Jackie Chan in here in his first American role. You've got all these great little cameos in here as well from the likes of Roger Moore, Sammy Davis Jr., Dean Martin, and so many other people. Farrah Fawcett as well. And it's just your typical kind of spoof movie, which kind of obviously preceded the ones we kind of get today or had in the middle 2000s. This kind of follows again in the same kind of vein as like the Naked Gun movies and all that. It's just so fun. You know, this is a real take on, there was a movie that came out in the late 80s called The Cannonball or Cannonball or something like that. This was kind of a take on that, and, you know, Rollerball and all these kind of movies that were out around that time. This is kind of what that takes the mickey out of. But I love this. I thought this was so much fun. Of course, the second one's a lot of fun as well. I watched them both back to back. You can still get that second one from Umbrella or JB Hi-Fi, wherever you pick up your Blu-rays, your discs from. I'd recommend watching them both back to back. These are just dumb, enjoyable fun. Don't expect too much out of these and you will just have an absolute blast. Highly recommended. Next up, we've got Silverado. Action comedy western classic. Rambling man Emmett Scott Glenn assembles a group of misfit cowboys, Kevin Costner, Kevin Kline, Danny Glover. After helping a group of settlers track down a pack of thieves, Emmett and his men descend on the troubled town of Silverado to seek their fortunes. Soon after arriving, they discover that the town has fallen into the grasp of a greedy rancher and a corrupt sheriff, with whom many of Emmett's men have unfinished business. Right, you know I love my westerns, I love my comedies, I love my comedy westerns, stuff like Young Guns and, you know, The Three Amigos and City Slickers, stuff like that, absolutely adore. I guess Silverado is sort of made in the same sort of vein as those movies. It's like a farcical sort of comedy, a bit of a riff on like the Magnificent Seven sort of thing, with this band of misfits being thrown together to go out and, you know, fight against the sheriff and these outlaws and stuff, but it's a comedy. Unfortunately, it's not really that hilarious. The laughs are kind of few and far between. It's a very long movie as well. It's over 2 hours long, and I found it was a little bit uninteresting. A lot of the time, it's just a bit of a middling movie. It never quite lands the same punches that Young Guns or City Slickers or The Three Amigos does. But it's an okay movie, and again, there's a really great cast in here. Some of my favorites of all time. So it is a decent one that I'm happy that I've finally watched, because I've wanted to see this for a very, very long time. Great that it's finally out on the Australian market on Blu-ray, and I could get my hands on it and check it out for myself. If you're into these kind of movies, I'd recommend it, but just don't expect too much from it. Next up is Jared Leto in Mr. Nobody. Before his death, the last mortal human on Earth reflects on his long past and thinks about the lives he might have led. Alright, unfortunately I did not find the time to watch this one because I've just been absolutely swamped with all these titles, as you can see. But I did want to spotlight it in this video right here. I'm not a huge Jared Leto fan either, so it's not one that I was, you know, in an immediate rush to check out. But by all accounts, this movie is apparently really, really great. It's got a 7.8 on IMDb. It is a very well-known cult sci-fi classic from the 2000s, from 2009, and apparently it's just a very great, like, visionary sci-fi film. And going by the description there, sounds really good. I think it's actually something that I'm going to be very interested in checking out. I did want to spotlight this because this is a movie that a lot of people have been begging for on Blu-ray for a long time. Hasn't been released on Blu-ray in Australia. It's been released overseas previously. I'm not too sure if this includes both the theatrical and director's cut of the movie that is included on the US disc. There's no mention of that here on there, and I haven't had the time to even pop the disc in. But Mr. Nobody, you might be pleasantly surprised to know, is finally out on Blu-ray for you to check out. We have got Jane Fonda's Workout Collection on DVD. Of course, Jane Fonda's original workout is one of the, if not still the best-selling VHS of all time. She followed it up with a number of other workout videos. These aren't movies, these are quite literally workout videos that Jane Fonda did. They were all highly, highly successful, and people still swear by these as, you know, really, really great workouts. Umbrella have reissued these in this little box set right here, which comes with a large, oversized Amur case with all of the workouts included in there on DVD. Now, of course, I am not going to be one who's going to be putting these workouts on and actually doing them, but people still swear by these. You know, they are noted as some of the best workouts of all time. I think we know why these were, you know, some of the best-selling VHSs of all time, though. I think for me, as a Jane Fonda fan, as someone who loves these little obscurios from cinema history, this is something that I wanted to kind of get into my collection, to just kind of have, you know, to have the Jane Fonda workout tape there, just as, again, a little curio. And I think it's quite cool. And just taking a look at these, of course, they're not in the best quality. It's not Blu-ray, it's DVD. These are probably the same, you know, DVD ports that have been floating around there for years and years. But, you know, you don't really want the quality from the video out of all these. I think people will get a bit out of these as actual workout tapes, but I think it's just a fun little curiosity to have in the collection. And finally, we have got the DVD release of Crabs. Get ready for shell shock. It's the Zombievers meets Godzilla hybrid you've always craved in the creature feature comedy horror of the year. Mutated by nuclear runoff, a horde of murderous horseshoe crabs descend on a sleepy California town, causing prom night terror. Alright, I've got to say from the top, I actually did not ask for this movie, to take a look at this movie. This is totally like completely out of anything that I'm really interested in. I'm just not a fan of these kind of really cheap, straight to DVD, mockbuster sort of things. I had a look at a bit of it. It's totally not my cup of tea, but I did want to spotlight it because it was sent over to me, and this is just, it's all out violence, all out sex, all out like exploitation stuff. It's a recent movie. I think it was only released just last year, and you know, the practical effects are pretty average. It's a very cheap movie. The acting's like terrible and all that kind of stuff. This one is a DVD only release. Umbrella did not put out a Blu-ray of this one, which is quite understandable. And at that is the end of this video, a wrap up of these two huge waves from Umbrella. As I said, I'm currently waiting on the next wave of Umbrella and probably the wave after that, and they'll be covered in a video or a couple of videos somewhere down the line. I'm really trying to get these videos shorter, so I really would like to maybe start doing these as they come in. Let me know down in the comments below, do you like my thoughts on these movies, or are you happy to me just to kind of go over the releases as they come in? Because I know a lot of the time of these videos is made up with me talking about the movies. Sometimes I just want to sit here and like kind of show the thing and just go, hey, this is just let me know down in the comments below what kind of, you know, commentary you like on these videos, and it'll depend on, you know, that'll help me decide how these videos are going to go forward in the future. Once again, I'll be putting up another couple of videos this month. I've already put one up, which is all the latest imprint titles. 2 waves of that I covered off in one video, and I'll also be putting one up in a week or so, which is a bunch of stuff from Kicks and Via Vision and personal pickups as well. Thanks again to Umbrella for sending over all this awesome stuff. I can't wait for the next batch. Thanks everybody for joining me once again. I'll see you in the next one. Take it easy.